This is the Morgan Ortagus Show on SiriusXM Patriot.
Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Welcome back to the Morgan Ortagus Show on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125. Well, we already have 1 hour down, 1 hour to go. Of course, we've been talking to you all morning. We're very excited to have Senator Jim Risch on the Morgan Ortagus Show. We also have Allison Esposito, who's running for Congress in New York. And of course, we will be taking your calls at the end of the hour. 866-957-2874. You can dial in around 1240 to ask me any question related to American national security and American foreign policy. Now, on that note, as you know, every single Sunday, we bring you the top interviews from around the country and, of course, from around the world. And this Sunday, I'm incredibly honored to have somebody who is just so important to American foreign policy, and that is Senator Jim Risch from Idaho. He's the ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so he does a lot of work around the world to keep America safe, and of course, in his oversight role in Congress to hold the administration accountable. So, for the first time, it is a massive honor. Welcome to the Morgan Ortagus Show, Senator Jim Risch.
Morgan, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and thanks for those kind words.
Well, sir, we just had a very long monologue where I sort of went through what happened for the last 2 weeks in the Middle East, what happened with the, of course, as we saw just a week and a half ago, that just devastating rocket attack by Hezbollah into Israel, into Israel's north, that killed about a dozen children on a playground. Of course, we know that Israel retaliated, killed a very senior Hezbollah official in Syria, and then killed a very senior Hamas official in the heart of Iran, in Tehran, when he was there for the presidential inauguration. Now, we've all been on edge this weekend, Senator Jim Risch. We know that the CENTCOM commander, General Kurilla, went to the Middle East. We know that U.S. forces have been attacked over the past year, of the past many months. So while we are expecting a major retaliation from Iran to come at any point, maybe even tomorrow, what do you assess as the situation on the ground, and is America doing enough to keep our diplomatic facilities and our military safe?
Well, let's start at this from 50,000 feet and work our way down. Most people, I think, aren't fully in tune with the fact that the Middle East is a very, very different place today than it was even 10 years ago. If this was 25 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, with conditions the way they are, I'd be wringing my hands like a lot of people are, saying, oh, this is going to be a regional war, an expanding war. But you have to remember that the Middle East is changing. It has changed. Iran is very much isolated today compared to where it was 10 years ago. I think one of the turning points people will look at to show that were the Abraham Accords that President Trump negotiated with some of the Arab countries, between those countries and Israel. Indeed, the invasion of Israel by Hamas, I believe, and I think a lot of people believe, was precipitated by the fact that it was a very not well-kept secret in D.C. that the Saudis were negotiating with Israel for normalization, similar to those Abraham Accords, and they really couldn't stand for that because they're the only ones out. Look, the problem in the Middle East is Iran. You talk about Hamas, you talk about the Houthis, you talk about Hezbollah. That is one entity. Now, it has 4 different parts, but it is one entity controlled by Tehran. The money comes from Tehran. The inspiration comes from Tehran. The training comes from Tehran. And the instructions come from Tehran. So make no mistake about it. This is a one-horse show at this point. And you have to think about it like that if you're going to react to it. So people that are saying, oh, this is going to expand into a regional war, there's no one left to get into this war. Right. Iran is already at war with Israel, and certainly the Palestinians and the Israelis are at war. But 10 years ago, we'd be worried about Arab countries getting into this. Saudis aren't going to get into this. Jordanians aren't going to get into this. The Egyptians aren't going to get into this. So I don't know, when they talk about this expanding into a regional war, I don't know who they're talking about, because there's nobody left to do that. And so if you think about it like this, it helps you focus your thoughts on what do we got to do to make things better. What we have to do to make things better is to contain Iran. That's what we have to do to make things better. So that's how I see it at this point. I mean, there's some stunning things that have happened that don't get the coverage that it should get. You recall the last time Iran took off after Israel, they fired 300 rockets at them. They went 0 for 300. None of them landed. But more importantly than that is who responded. Well, the Israelis themselves have an outstanding defense mechanism, but we also flew. The Brits and the French also flew. But the big news story here is that Jordanians and Saudis flew against those Iranian missiles. That is the first time in history that an Arab country has taken arms up against another Middle Eastern country to protect Israel. And that's exactly what happened. Now, if that doesn't convince people that things are different there, really nothing will. So things are different in the Middle East. You got to think about it differently. The problems are Iran, and that's what we got to focus on.
Well, amen and hallelujah to that, Senator Risch. I totally agree. One of the things that was even frustrating for me when I heard President Biden giving his speech to the American people, I'm paraphrasing. This isn't, verbatim what he said, but essentially he said that U.S. forces, for the first time in modern presidency, were not engaged in a war overseas. And I thought, my goodness, has no one briefed him on the incoming that our U.S. Navy ships, for example, are taking from the Houthis, or the fact that the U.S. American the American Embassy branch office in Tel Aviv, all the way in Tel Aviv, 1,500 miles from Yemen, was just barely avoided being hit by the Houthis. That's the one thing that I think, Senator Risch, that maybe the American people may not fully understand. And again, why CENTCOM Commander General Kurilla just landed in the Middle East is, yes, we are helping Israel, from the last attack from Iran and from Hezbollah and others shoot down these missiles and using our air defense systems as well. But we are also constantly under attack. The president may have forgotten this, but I didn't forget that we lost 3 troops in service members in Jordan in January, and we remain under attack. Can you describe that, sir, a little bit more for our audience, the threat that Americans are facing?
Yeah. Again, I come back to that the first thing you need to focus on is Iran. We are under constant threats from Iran. The Obama administration and the Biden administration failed to understand what the regime in Tehran wants to do. They want to kill every Jewish person, eliminate the Jewish state, and kill all of us. This is not make believe. These aren't people that you can sit down with and say, well, let's be reasonable about this.
Right.
They don't think the same way we do. They think differently than we do. Our value system is be kind to each other, try to make peace, try to get along. When you're talking about these radicals, they really believe that their job on earth is to kill us. And so you have to think about it like that.
Yep.
The Biden administration has just totally upended what Trump had put in place during the 4 years he was there. This is about money as much as it is anything else. We had when Trump was president, we had turned the screw down enough that the Iranians were only selling about 200,000 barrels a day. Today they're up to 2 million barrels a day. Where's that money going? Not to help people in Iran that certainly need assistance, but rather it's being put out to these terrorist organizations to kill Americans, to kill Israelis. So you've got it. That's one of the first things you have to look at is stopping the flow of money, and it can be done. Trump proved it can be done. But this business of we just have to be nicer to them and everything will be fine is just trash. That doesn't work. It will not work with these people. You've got to toughen up on them.
I couldn't agree more. I was a part of the maximum economic pressure campaign in the Trump administration against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We were starving them, starving their proxies. We've got to get back to that. There's so much more I want to talk to you about on Iran, but I also want to highlight something that you did this week. Nearly every Republican U.S. senator co-signed your letter to the Biden-Harris administration, and this letter underscored how delaying weapons to Israel will only help Iran. I was sitting upstairs at the Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's address to the Congress, where he spoke about this. So, if you could just explain to our audience who may not be aware of this, where do you think the Biden-Harris administration currently stands as it relates to getting Israel the weapons that you and Congress have approved in a timely manner? Are they doing enough? And tell us a little bit more about this letter.
Yeah, they are not doing enough, and thus the reason for the letter. And it comes back to what I said about dealing with the Iranians. They only understand one thing, and it's the fist. It is not kindness or understanding. That just doesn't work with them. You know, when Israel took out Hania in Tehran itself, a Hamas leader, the response of the Biden-Harris administration was they should tone it down. For crying out loud. This is the kind of thing that backs off the Iranians. Remember when Trump took out General Soleimani? That really put a coolness on the Iranians for some time after that, because the Ayatollahs and others think, well, if they can get Soleimani, they can get us. They ought to be thinking about the same thing with Hania. If they can get them in a bedroom of a place that is owned by the Iranian state in their capital in Tehran, they can get anybody. The Israelis can. Yeah. So that's what will make the Iranians think about that. And saying to back off on that is absolutely nonsense. They talk about these as assassinations. These aren't assassinations. These are battlefield deaths. The entire Middle East is a battlefield for the Iranians. They use it as such everywhere. Anytime you can catch one of their combatants, you do what you have to do, and that's what will rein them up. So they need the purpose of that letter was to again try to shake the tree in the administration and say, look, give them what they need, let them get it done, and quit criticizing them. And start criticizing the people that are fighting them. This thing would be over in a second if Hamas would release the prisoners, surrender, and quit shooting. The war is over. But the administration acts as if this whole thing's Israel's fault. It is not Israel's fault.
Senator Risch, I could not agree with you more. This has been so helpful to hear your perspective, especially again as you are ranking member of Senate Foreign Relations. On that note, you also said something that I just thought was so interesting. You described the Biden-Harris administration as foreign policy by press release. Tell my listeners, if you don't mind, sir, what you mean by that.
Well, look, these countries don't respond to press releases. They don't respond to talk. They respond to the toughness, the stiffness, the commitment that their adversaries have to reining them in. That's what they respond to. So this business of getting on TV and saying don't, I mean, every time he says don't, they do. And now he's gone to stop, and that I doubt is going to work anymore. These people do not respond to that sort of thing. What you do is you do a Soleimani, or you do as the Israelis did with Hania, and those people sitting in Tehran are going to be thinking, you know, if they can get them, they can get us. And that's what you need to put in their mind, so that every night when they go to bed and every morning when they wake up, that's the first thing they think is if they're going to hear a buzz of a Hellfire missile coming from above.
I think you're right, sir. I agree with that. One final thing that I promised, and I have interviewed the families of some of the American hostages that are still held captive. It's August 4th. They've been held captive since October 7th, 2023. I've interviewed them, and I had the good fortune of sitting in front of two of the sets of parents of some American hostages that are left behind in Gaza still. And I have promised those parents that every Sunday on my radio show and every time I'm on Fox News that I would remind Americans that there are still their fellow Americans left behind in Gaza, held hostage by a terror group. We've seen over 40 Americans killed. And by the way, there would be more hostages, American hostages, if it wasn't for the fact that many of them died in captivity. So it's incredibly important. As you can imagine, this is just every parent's worst nightmare to have their child held hostage by a terrorist group. What do you think the future will hold for a hostage deal? Are we doing enough to get our Americans home?
Well, look, again, the problem is dealing with these people is like dealing with the devil. They don't care about the terrible anxiety that parents feel about their children, their spouses, about their spouse. They don't care about that stuff at all, and they're only interested in doing the kind of violence that they do against us, against the Israelis. Gosh, you pray for these people every day, but the hostage situation is an incredibly difficult situation, and that's particularly true when they're held by people like Hamas that don't care about it. And look, the Palestinian people certainly have a responsibility for this also. You can't tell me that with those people packed into the Gaza as they are, those Palestinian people don't know places where they're holding hostages. If they could pass that information along, they could do some rescue missions or that sort of thing, and you don't get that at all. The Iranian situation is entirely different. You got a regime that is very much out of touch with the Iranian people. The Iranian people have no love for the regime at all. In Palestine, in Hamas, the people that are living in Gaza seem to be fully on board with Hamas and do nothing of assistance to bring this thing to an end. So, in any event, these hostage situations are very difficult. They are negotiating. They're going to continue to negotiate. Every time we do a hostage exchange, we always wind up on the short end of the deal. That is, we always give a whole lot more than we get, which is just proven by the Russian exchange that we had. But that's the way we are. We're a kind, caring people, and we'll do everything we can to bring those hostages home.
Absolutely. Well, Senator Jim Risch from Idaho, again, the ranking member on Senate Foreign Relations Committee, incredibly important committee, especially with everything that you have had to deal with around the world with when I look at it, Senator Risch, when you look at the Biden presidency, there has been a catastrophe or a new war started in every year of this administration. We have just seen war and chaos for the past few years. In a way, ultimately, I mean, you and I didn't even get a chance, for example, to talk about China today because we are once again bogged down by deterrence failures in the Middle East. So your perspective, Senator Dimmers, is so helpful. I hope you will come back. It's quite an honor to have you on the Morgan Ortagus Show.
Thanks so much. Enjoyed it, Morgan, and hope to do this again.
Thank you, sir. Well, we are going to take a very quick commercial break. Then coming up, we have Allison Esposito running for Congress in New York. Again, a former cop. You're going to like hearing from her if you haven't yet. She's got a fantastic perspective on national security. And then around 12:40, you can call in 866-957-2874. I'm going to take your question. So let's take a very quick commercial break, and then we're back with Allison Esposito. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Ortagus Show on Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125.